Charlotte scene, yeah. The dynamic 30, the dynamic.
All right. Testing. All right. Welcome to the 20th spring training for Tampa Bay Rays baseball and the 9th for the Rays here in Charlotte County. Thanks for coming. I'm Dave Howler, the PR director for the Rays, and first of all, I want to thank our friends from Charlotte County, the Charlotte Harbor Visitor and Convention Bureau, and the Charlotte Stone Crabs for their hospitality today and throughout the spring. Also, the Visitor and Convention Bureau has generously provided us all with lunch from Sonny's Barbecue following the press conference. So thank you for that. Dukes, where's Dukes? Dukes has packets of press releases with all kinds of information on spring training, the Rays' involvement in the Charlotte County community, and what's new here at Charlotte Sports Park, including the scoreboard out in left field. So please be sure to see him if you haven't already. Our communications staff is a little scattered today as we're still completing some shoots on the field and elsewhere. But you'll get a chance to meet them soon enough if you haven't already. And any credential-related questions you may have can be directed at Carly Fisher, who's back there on her phone right now. Also, you can pick up your universal spring training credentials from her afterward. So here today with us we have manager Kevin Cash, Senior Vice President of Baseball Operations Chaim Bloom, and Senior Vice President of Baseball Operations and General Manager Erik Neander. Dukes will pass around a microphone for questions. Also, if you could if you have a question for Cash, if you could direct it to him specifically, and otherwise Erik and Chaim will share the rest of them. First, before any questions, quick word from Kevin Cash.
Yeah, I think obviously we're very excited to be here, but we did hear some not so good news on one of y'all's colleagues, Steve Dumig. Exchange had communicated with him yesterday. We're obviously thinking about him as one of our friends and supporters, and he's got a lot of support in the community. That there are a lot of thoughts from the organization for some good news coming his way.
Would you elaborate, Kevin, on what you're looking at with some of the many options on the right side of the infield?
Yeah, to me it's pretty exciting. I mean, we've got some guys in Brad Miller, Tim Beckham, Nick Franklin that we have some history with, and then we also have Daniel Robertson and some other young players coming in to fill, and that we're going to get a good look at. I don't think anything has been defined. The most that we have expressed to the players leading up to today is let's come in, let's be versatile. Everybody's going to get a lot of reps at different spots.
Will Miller see some time at second?
Miller will see some time at second.
Kevin, you talk about the right side of the infield. How about the outfield situation? Because it seems really cluttered now with Steven and KK and Colby Rasmus and Malix and Dickerson, and how to get all those guys playing time.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't use cluttered simply because we feel like we have a lot of good options out there. Personally, I have no history at all with Malix Smith, other than the fact, other than hearing a lot of positive about him. He's a speed element that we're able to bring in. We talked about having a guy that can kind of complement KK, and he's very much a speed player. So that's going to add to us. And then the other guys, we do have some history with, Colby Rasmus being new, but we're going to continue to balance it out. Everybody's going to get reps. I mean, on the injury front, Colby had some issues last year. Steven Souza ended his year early. We'll monitor that early in camp, and it'll open up some opportunities for the outfield to have a pretty good flow once games start here in spring.
Kevin, obviously there's a lot of retooling during the winter with this team and this roster. Where do you see are you anticipating the biggest changes with this club in terms of production that you might have not had last year?
Well, we added some veteran bats, but I keep falling back, and not to sound like a broken record. Look, Corey Dickerson, Brad Miller, and Logan Morrison really came on strong for us at the end of last year. If we see that to start the season, that's kind of like three different players than we had to start last year, because in their own way they all hit their rough patch of the season at the same time early on, and then seemed to really pick it up. So the thought is, let's finish where we left off from an offensive standpoint with those guys. You bring in Colby, and you know, there's another handful of guys with Kevin Kiermaier, the way he finished up. But we're excited. We like the way we did some things offensively. We know we have to get better, but we're incredibly optimistic with you know, Corey, Brad, and Lomo, how they finish their seasons.
Erik and Chaim, or Erik and or Chaim. There's been kind of mixed reviews on your off-season work. I mean, some of the computers like it, some of the odds don't like it. There've been different, you know, kind of takes from media people. I mean, what moves do you think maybe aren't getting enough credit for, or which move you think can make a bigger difference?
I think in terms of looking at it, we think we've increased the level of depth, the level of competition. You know, we have guys that internally, you know, Kevin just cited a few of them that we think, you know, didn't perform out of the gates as well as we had hoped, but really came on strong. And having those guys back and with the time under their belts where they come into a place they know, we think, you know, those guys are going to be a big part of our team. And we didn't want to necessarily go out and displace a lot of those guys. We wanted to give them the opportunity to have their space to continue to develop and to continue to compete. What we wanted to try to do, you know, with the group that we've had, is to bring in some guys, some youth, some different styles of players, some guys that can do different things to try to put us in position to, you know, to have a lot of different possibilities for how things get together. So we felt we added depth. We felt like we added some youth, but we, you know, it's quantity depth, or quality depth. It's guys we feel really good about, and we're going to give Kevin a lot of options through camp to piece this together in different ways. But you know, the trades, the transactions we made where we sent major league players, you know, out, the key pieces we got back are guys that are ready to contribute very, very soon.
One of the guys you got was De Leon. Is he big league ready at this point? I know he did see some action with the Dodgers. Do you expect him on this opening day roster?
Well, we've got a lot of good options in our rotation. Obviously, maintaining starting pitching depth is something that has always been a priority for us. And look, you look at what he's accomplished in the minor leagues, and you put that up against anybody's track record. You know, I think we're excited to go into camp with a lot of different options. We want to make sure with Jose, especially, that we build up his innings responsibly. But that said, I mean, you look at the talent, and he's going to fit in right with our group on a talent basis. I don't think we ever like to put a formal limit on anybody, but it's something we monitor as we go along, and we're going to make sure that however we handle him, that we're keeping that in mind.
Kevin, what are your expectations for Alex Cobb, and how much would a healthy Alex Cobb make a difference to this rotation?
Well, it made quite a difference. I mean, 2 years ago we were announcing him as the opening day starter. You know, that right there just kind of shows how important he could be to our rotation. In fairness to Alex, you know, this is his first normal offseason he's had. Through all communication, whether it's through Jim Hickey, myself, or even his teammates, Alex seems to be really excited, eager to get down here and kind of pick up from where he left off before the injury. You know, we've seen it a couple times now with a guy like Matt Moore coming back from an injury, and with Alex last year, the priority was to get him back and be healthy. They finished their seasons when they started the rehab healthy. That's priority one. I think you got to look at the results and put them to the side a little bit, clean the slate, and bring him back in, and know that how valuable he's going to be for us going forward.
This is both for Erik and Chaim. When you look at and assessing the minor league system and the drafts that this organization has had over the last few years, there's only two guys, first-round picks, that are still currently on the roster. Your 2011 draft, you had 10 picks in the top 75 and come away with one player that's really kind of so early on has made an impact. When assessing what you've done in the minor leagues and knowing that the financial limitations to this club and moving forward with the success, is that an area that really needs to be improved on?
Yes, certainly. I think when you look back at the draft, obviously there's some picks that we're proud of. There's some picks that you look back, and if you were to redraft, you'd probably have gone a different direction. I think we all know in this organization how important that pipeline is to us, and so we're always looking at different ways, whether it's in the draft, whether it's what we do player developmentally, all the things that we do to make those decisions and then to bring the players along, that we're doing the right things by them. So I think through that time, it's always important for us to take a good look at our processes and figure out how we can make them better, whether we're using our resources better in the draft or using them better developmentally. So there's a lot of success stories to learn from, and there's a lot of things that we do differently, and we try to learn from those too.
Does the lack of success there limited the team's ability to put a competitive team on the field right now?
Well, we feel we are going to be able to put a competitive team on the field right now. So you'd always like to, get as much talent through the draft, as much talent internationally, as much talent through your development system as possible. That's never going to change. And however much you get, you're always going to want to get more. There's always more that you can do, and there's always more that we're going to look to do. And especially in an industry where you're competing with 29 other clubs to do the same thing, you're going to make sure that you want to do that. But we're proud of the group that we're bringing into camp right now, and think it's a competitive group.
Gentlemen, you guys have quite the selection of catchers in the depth chart, the catching depth chart rather, with Ramos still obviously recovering, and you've got Maley and Casali, and then some guys that you brought in as well. How do you guys feel about the catching depth this season as opposed to maybe years past?
Yeah, it's something where in years past, there's been a lot of turnover. There's been, a lot of guys that have been in for a year, out for, and then they're gone, and the way it's played out. So one of the things that we're going to have this camp are a couple of guys here that know our pitchers well. We got guys like Luke and Kurt that spent time with Blake Snell through the minor leagues. They've gotten to know each other. It's a position where that relationship, that connection is just so critical. And so that's something that we haven't necessarily had in a while, as those guys come in here and to compete. Jesus Sucre, who we picked up from Seattle, is another guy to come in to compete, a veteran guy with great leadership skills. It's a very strong defensive catcher. And then obviously Wilson, who's on track and when healthy, demonstrated what he's capable of doing last year. And that's about as good as you're going to find. So the human component, and the relationships is something that with the guys we have, the stability internally, and then the guys we've added externally, we're pretty fired up about as well.
I can hear you.
How concerned are you? How does WBC affect your maybe scripting or planning spring training, and how concerned are you about its effects on your players that you have who are participating in it?
We're always going to be concerned about our players, whether they're getting ready for spring training, for opening day against the Yankees, or they're getting ready to go to the WBC. We'd love to have our eyes and hands on them all the time, but it's a great honor for these guys to get to go play, represent their country. So we're very aware of that. The scheduling, look, we've got a little bit more time this spring. Spring training is starting a little earlier, so we can stretch some guys out and their workloads out. That's going to help, but you're cautiously optimistic that these guys are going to be smart about their workload. And the good thing is the two guys that are going, Chris Archer and Alex Colomé at the big league level, they do a really good job of managing and knowing their limitations and getting themselves ready to perform.
With the extra time, maybe it affords you a little more time to decide on competition. I know a lot of times when you come to spring, a lot of jobs back in mind are probably predetermined. Would that extra time allow it to be a little more competitive? Would jobs still be won in the spring?
No, I don't know if the extra time allows that. I think the extra time allows us to get better looks, and it also allows with our starting pitchers, that we're allowed to kind of work them in a little bit slower rather than just getting them ready to pitch for the first spring training game. These extra couple days that we have here, we're going to utilize those days as they're going to throw some bullpens. They're going to get an extra day off of rest here and there. So in that way, it's been a nice benefit.
Kevin, I assume you're optimistic about the club you have this year. If so, what gives you that optimism that it is going to be better than it was in 2016?
Well, the way some of the guys finished, Matt Duffy's a guy that we didn't really get to see, and we got to know him, and he was great, but we didn't see him healthy. We're anticipating him to work through spring and be healthy for us and be a huge addition to defense and offense. And then I like a couple of the guys that we brought into the bullpen. Sean Tollison's a guy that he was really good for 2 seasons. He might have had an off year, dealt with some injuries, but the track record's there that he can be really productive for us. Just the continued maturity of some of these young players, and you complement them with some of the veterans with a healthy Alex Cobb and Evan Longoria. There's a lot to be optimistic about.
Chaim or Erik, could you guys just run through the medicals? You've got, I think, 5 guys coming off surgeries, and what there's timetables and procedures and process and progress and all that looks like.
Yeah, we'll go through them. Jump in case I accidentally miss one. But most of them we expect to be moving along at a controlled pace during spring training, but expecting them that they'll be ready on opening day. And if not, then shortly thereafter. I think you could say that. Kevin talked about Duffy. He's done great with every checkpoint since the surgery, and it's really just a matter of bringing him along, making sure we're doing it at a good pace and getting him ready for the season. That same thing really, with Souza, with Lomo, Rasmus. Who am I missing here?
Ramos.
And with those 3 guys all, but hopeful that they can be ready on opening day. And, that worst case, if we do have some kind of small setback, that it won't be a big one. Ramos, we're going to learn as he goes along. We know that's going to be longer. And we've talked about it before. We don't know exactly when. We said it when he signed. I know he's got very high expectations for when he'll be able to make it back. And that's great. And he has worked his tail off trying to get back on the field, and he's very motivated, really wants to make an impact, and so we're not going to hold him back. We just don't want to do anything to jeopardize his health.
Kevin, let me follow up on something Tom asked earlier. Do you expect to be playing meaningful games in September? Do you think this team will compete all the way?
Yes.
Can you expand on that?
We expect to be playing games in October. That's the goal. We're confident with what we've done this offseason. We're confident with the core guys that we had finishing the year. You look at what our strengths are. I think a lot of people would have agreed starting pitching was our strength coming into last year. We still feel the same way. It was unfortunate that we hit a little bump in the road, and they all had it happen at one time. It was a tough month or tough 25 days to overcome. So we're optimistic with our pitchers, with our position core, and these guys are coming in. You're gonna see, just talking to them this offseason, there's a lot of guys in that clubhouse that take a lot of pride in not only their personal performances, but the performance of the team. And I don't think anybody last year felt good about anything that last series in Texas. And it's probably motivated some guys, and it's driven them to work on some things that they needed to work on. And I think we're all going to hear that message once we start seeing them and talking with the players as they come in.
This for Cash. People love to define an ace, a number one starter. You have a nice problem here between Cobb and Arch. Do you have a defined number one starter at this point entering training?
No. I think we got some really good pitchers. I don't think now the time, what is it, the 13th, to define really anything. This is a time to catch up, enjoy watching what the guys have done. We're all excited to see see the guys get off the mound starting tomorrow. There'll be a couple groups in the next coming days, but I don't think, being at this time, that anything needs to be defined.
Kevin, last year you talked about trying to get bullpen guys to get more than just 3 outs, and that led to a little bit of success, but also you had guys like Erasmo Ramirez, who you could tell was out of gas midway through the season. Is there any sort of thought to tweaking the philosophy, especially for guys trying to keep guys with enough bullets?
Yeah, don't use them as much. No, we like that versatility in the bullpen, and it's not the easiest to find. And the good thing is, talking about the schedule, we're going to have some guys that we're going to stretch out. We'll see some guys that have that versatility between Durham and the big league club to get multiple inning looks in. I mean, Erasmo was extremely important to our team last year, and more guys to complement him and carry that load will help.
Kevin, what does bringing a guy like Ricky Weeks, what does he bring to a team like this? Obviously veteran leadership, but his versatility is probably something that you guys are really looking forward to having around.
Yeah, I mean, we signed him. I was fortunate enough to talk to him. You don't hear a negative thing about it. The guy supposedly he walks in a clubhouse and is just presence from the get-go. He handles his business, the way he treats younger players, older players, staff. I mean, everything you hear about him is super positive. We'll always take those types of guys. And then you bring in the fact that he can hit. And he's shown the ability that he can place him first. We're going to talk to him and see how if he wants to take some balls in the outfield. But his main focus is to come in here and be a pretty big bat for us against left-handed pitching.
This is for Chaim or Erik, either one. Could there be somebody who makes your opening day roster who's not even in your camp yet? Somebody outside the organization currently?
Yeah, I think it's possible. Through the off season and with the competition and the flexibility, we have a lot of young talent. We have a lot of guys that we're asking to do something that they haven't done recently or haven't done before with respect to putting the team together. So we want to get to camp, give these guys an opportunity to play, to gel, to see how it all kind of fits together and what it looks like. But we've with design have kept things open enough to have the flexibility to where if there's something else that we feel like we can acquire from outside of our current group, we're gonna be open to doing that. But we want to make sure that there's enough of an opportunity to let our young guys here have the chance to play, to develop, and to take off.
Just to follow up, is there an area that you might be looking at a little bit more than maybe other areas?
Not necessarily. I think some of it might depend on defensively where guys are comfortable and how that looks. That I think can dictate a lot. Above and beyond that, I think we generally have enough flexibility with our roster, positionally speaking, where if there's an opportunity to acquire someone from the outside, I think there's a lot of different ways we can maneuver the group we have in order to be opportunistic about adding just about anyone.
Chaim, you were speaking earlier about pitching depth, starting pitching depth with the De La Rosa. And so for you or Erik, the newest acquisition, not slated to impact the staff this year, talk about getting Nathan Eovaldi, please.
Well, unfortunately, nothing to announce just yet on that front. We'll talk about it as soon as we can talk about it.
A couple more games.
Kevin, if you look at Chris Archer's record on itself, wins, losses, it looks like he's had an awful year, but his ERA was pretty strong. His home ERA was very good. Was he just a hard luck pitcher that didn't get the support, or was his game off that much to you?
No, I think it's a combination of both, but we certainly don't dwell on wins and losses. We understand that there's a lot of other factors that play into having a successful starting pitcher, and Chris Archer did a lot of good things for us last year. He pitched a lot of really good ball games. Him, along with the other 5 or 6 starters, like I said earlier, they had times where they just were missing something. But to Arch's credit, I thought he really rebounds back to finish really strong. Heading into the offseason.
Kevin, you mentioned the bullpen. I mean, that seems like an area that probably fairly could have targeted for some improvement after last season. You mentioned Tollison. Are there some other areas there where that can get better internally?
Well, Brad Boxberger is, to me, he's a big key. And, I mean, we're talking about an elite back-end reliever that, like Chaim or Erik said, had kind of a lost year. And not by his choice, by injuries. And, he rehabs an injury here in spring. He gets back on the mound. He hurts himself, I believe, a groin in Kansas City. So it was a tough year for Box, but we all know what he's capable of, and if we have a healthy Box and get him going right there, that's a huge void that could be filled.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today, and stick around for some lunch.